Hey everybody, my name is Rich, and this is Rich Talks Records, episode 21, and we will be covering today the second and I would have to imagine final, because I cannot even begin to imagine the circumstances that would have to come together to make another one. So what I would imagine is the final Stooges album, their fifth and final studio album, 2013's Ready to Die. And there's the back cover. I do not have anything cool for this record. I just have the CD that I would have purchased. I purchased this a couple months after it came out. So, hope you guys liked the, and this is the lyric sheet on the inside. Hopefully you guys liked my silly video that I put up yesterday of the records I listen to the most. Just a frivolous little thing. I debated whether I should even put it up, but, I thought, why not? Why the hell not? So anyway, at any rate, but we're back to, that was a bit of a lark. We're back to serious business now, so away we go. So a lot changed. In the time between the weirdness to Ready to Die. The Weirdness came out on Virgin. Iggy, in between these two albums, Iggy made two solo albums. This would have been his last album for Virgin, Preliminaire, which I like a lot. I don't know that I would sort of fully consider it a full-on great album, but I really like the good stuff on here, of which there's a lot. And honestly, I haven't listened to this one in a while. And then, so this was in '09, so this would have come out the year that Ron passed away. And at that point, I thought it was interesting that Iggy was sort of demarcating. He had talked about doing a record like this for years. Back in the '96 Mojo interview, he had talked about touring with just a piano and him singing ballads. So all those years later, it looked as if the Stooges were going to continue to be a going concern, and that was going to be how he made rock records and toured, then he was going to sort of make records like this along the way, that were non-rock records. And I remember Iggy doing interviews saying that given that he was playing with the Stooges and that he was playing with, guys who could play on that level, that he didn't want to just get in a studio with any old rock musicians or studio guys and bang out rock music. So that made sense, and it seemed like that would be kind of the way going forward. And then in 2012, he put out this, A Prey, which was put out on a tiny little label and sort of barely given release. Again, I like this record. I think it's a cool record. I don't know that I would necessarily say it's a great record. There are certain records that I think have a tough time escaping their context, where you can truly evaluate whether it's actually great or not. Because in some ways it's kind of so outside the realm. So yeah, I really like this album. There's nothing on it that I don't like, but it's a little and this might be a bit of a jump of a comparison, but it's a little bit like Glenn Danzig's Black Aria. I always liked Black Aria. I haven't heard it in God knows how long, because an ex-girlfriend made off with it. But could I evaluate it as, I don't know what you would call it, classical composition? I don't know. I don't know that it would sort of stand up to rigorous analysis. It's not in any way connected to his rock records, or just the rest of Danzig's works. I have no sort of, I don't know that I would ever be able to review Black Aria, So this is, this is in a way similar to that. Like, it's cool, but I don't, another record I feel the same way about would be Bjork's Gling Glow. Again, it's cool, but I don't know. Is it a great commanding album of jazz standards? Maybe. I don't know. I like listening to it, and that's kind of all I can go off of. So Ron, as I just mentioned, Ron passed away in 2009, and as was the sort of the trend at the time, because Lou Reed didn't get inducted as a solo artist into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame until he died. And I remember after Ron died, I remember thinking, Jesus Christ, now they're going to get in the fucking Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? Like, now is when it's going to happen. And sure enough, it did. Because that was always one of my biggest strikes against the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, there are many reasons to despise it. But, and extremely prolific YouTuber Ralph Vieira makes an outstanding point about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when he says, who gives a shit? They're the enemy. And it's hard to argue with that point of view, right? But if you do think about it, if you sort of, that was always one of my biggest problems, was they don't even have the Stooges in there. Fuck these people. So the Stooges, the impossible happened, and the Stooges got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I mention this because I feel that it is, for me, nothing's ever going to top the Sex Pistols letter of that we're not showing up that John Lydon wrote, and that misspelling, the Steve Jones sort of send up of the misspelling of congratulations. That is one of the sharpest things that John ever wrote. And the urine and wine, that little bit, I have used for years when needling people. I love that. That's fucking fantastic. I don't think anything's ever going to top that. But the Stooges induction was incredible. And in a lot of ways, kind of the later period Iggy that you see with the blonde dyed hair and my Florida Iggy, the super tanned, kind of grizzled facial hair, and then sort of he's gone back to kind of throughout the 90s and stuff. Iggy dressed in kind of gray t-shirts and jeans. There wasn't a lot of dressing up, but he's sort of at some point has sort of gone back to dressing in a more eccentric style, kind of like he did in the late 70s. And the sort of image that you see, like the Iggy that was on Anthony Bourdain's show, or the Iggy that Thurston comes and interviews him, that guy. I think the rock and roll induction ceremony is in some ways kind of like the definitive portrait of later period Iggy, and this guy who is the ultimate survivor, and but also whose scars are now showing. Because back in the 90s when I got into him, part of it was he appeared seemingly invincible, but by this point it was starting to, now it's far more exaggerated with the one leg being longer than the other, and now it's really exaggerated. But at this point it was the age was showing, and just the sheer amount of what he had been through and done to himself, it was starting to show, and the fact that Iggy does what he does anyway is that much more, fucking incredible, right? So at any rate, Iggy, if I'll link to it below, Iggy walking up to the podium, doing double guns the whole way, and then that speech that he read off the index cards was fucking amazing. It's one of my favorite things ever. It's it is as rock and roll as it gets, because it's not just provocation for the sake of provocation. It's provocation because he has something to say and he fucking means it. And also, I have to love, as a Rolling Stones fan and as a Ron Asheton fan, I have to love the image that he put forward of Ron and Brian Jones sitting at a table in heaven trying to flick ashes down on the corporate people and record company executives sitting in the crowd. That's a beautiful image. But that speech is remarkable, and like the stuff that he had to say to the industry leaders, incredible. There was a speech he gave, I want to say at Oxford, around the same time. That was, or maybe it was a couple years later, but that was as amazing as well. Of just like, holy shit, this guy's fucking brain is he doesn't mince words, and but he also leaves it open enough for you to connect the dots, and I absolutely love that about him. So, at any rate, Iggy had made these 2 albums, and in the interim, James Williamson comes back, and we'll later on we'll sort of get into all of that, but and what resulted from all of that that I've been able to kind of like sort of piece together, but basically James Williamson had left the music industry after Soldier, and had been a high-ranking executive at Sony, and had taken an early retirement buyout, basically. And so, James was doing very, very well for himself, and had done very well for himself. So as an electronics executive. So there was, when he agreed to come back and tour with the Stooges, he did some warm-up gigs. I think he's in like Malibu, and he went to like a local bar with like just some guys in a bar band, and there were videos that went up on YouTube of him sort of doing like warm-up gigs, because he just had not touched a guitar in decades. And it was those videos, I don't know if those are still out there, but that was like back, like I want to say like that's back like when YouTube had like the 10-minute limits, and I want to say there were 2 videos, and it was fascinating to watch because it was really weird. It was he hit every note, but it was like somebody like playing. It was like somebody like very proficient at a typewriter. It was he hit every note, but it was all very robotic. It was all like in the spot where there's supposed to be the guitar fill. And then, so when the Stooges, I want to say his first Stooges show back was at like some big, maybe European or South American festival, maybe Australian, who knows. But it was at a big like outdoor middle of the day festival. And I remember it was maybe like a couple months later, and I remember like watching it thinking like, all right, we'll see how he does. Like, we'll see what if those gigs in Malibu paid off. Because, it was interesting, and it was interesting that he didn't miss a note, and yet it was so like, it was so robotic. And sure enough, in that time, he shook off the rust, and the robot rust, and he was doing the James Williamson thing just as he had in 1972. It was fucking amazing, and he like locked right in. He locked right in with Scott and with Mike Watt. And one of the other things I thought was cool when they brought back James Williamson was they kept Steve McKay around. I loved that, that you just had this like lifer musician who you really get the feeling truly did it for the right reason. So I always thought that was awesome. So so yeah, this album. So we'll get right into it. So this, like I said, this there's not a lot of information about the making of this record. The only thing I remember was the Stooges were now in Indiac. This came out on the blues label Fat Possum, and I remember Iggy did some really funny, self-deprecating commercials for the album. That I mean, they were hysterical. They were really good. I wonder if I could find those to link them. I wonder if those are still out there. So those were really, really good. And it was just like self-deprecating, like, Jesus, we're on a fucking indie label. Like, it was really good. So there's not a ton of information. Wikipedia simply says that this album was recorded in 2012 and 2013. So that doesn't offer much. Came out in April of 2013. Was recorded at Fantasy Studios in California. James not only was James playing guitar and co-wrote every song except for one with Iggy. Not only that, but he produced the thing as well, and kind of assembled a cast of musicians to supplement the band, which we will be getting into. I almost knocked over my 10 records that I've listened to the most. That would be terrible. Could you imagine what would happen if I knocked over that copy of Bette Midler's No Frills? How can I carry on? So anyway, they recorded at Fantasy Studios. Fantasy Studios is where CCR worked a lot, and I don't know if they did all their records there, but they apparently did a bunch of them. And Green Day made Dookie there, but Journey recorded two of their biggest albums there. So it's I think has since closed, but the photos, I guess like the website for the studio still exists, and the photos of the rooms are absolutely fucking beautiful. It is truly a beautiful, beautiful studio. So sad that it is no longer up and running. So yeah, we get to the album. This came out. I was unaware that the album was out until after it had been released, because April of 2013, I was no longer the manic person of the late 2000s. The Rich in 2007 and Rich in 2013 were two totally different animals. It was the beginning. It was the beginning of a 3-year odyssey. I've made references to this in the past of what I call the divorce period. It was 3 years almost to the day, but it was definitely to the month. And I'll be honest, not much during this time. There was a lot going on. You know, REM had broken up, Sonic Youth had broken up, and a lot of kind of, like, Henry Rollins wasn't making records anymore. A lot of my old standbys had sort of gone away, or, like, retreated in one form or another, or felt like reduced versions of themselves. So, I had a lot going on in my life. And even the months leading up to, quote-unquote, the divorce period were weird and fraught and chaotic, and not the sort of, I don't know, controlled chaos or chaos that I had some sort of say in of the late 2000s. This was chaos that was destructive and evil and felt extremely wrong. So it was a completely different thing, and I was very much just back on my heels in life. And so there was the beginnings of the rounds of, like, Sonic Youth solo albums, which some I liked more than others. I think the best thing to come out of that was the song Lecce Leaving by Lee Ronaldo. That is a masterpiece. But like there were like the Dinosaur Junior reunion albums. Those were okay. Some I liked more than others, but none of them would stick with me. I would buy these records. They would be in the car with me for 2 weeks, and I'd be like, oh yeah, they still got it, and then it would kind of leave my mind. The only two records as 2013 went along that made any impression upon me at all and meant anything to me and spoke to me were Grant Hart's The Argument and this. And I've struggled over the years with if this album is a masterpiece or not. In my life, it's a masterpiece. Kind of like with Soldier. In my life, it's a masterpiece. In the realm of Iggy's body of work or the Stooges' body of work, especially the Stooges, I don't know that you could legitimately consider it a masterpiece because you've got the first album, Funhouse and Raw Power. I mean, what compares to that? Pretty much nothing. So, yeah. But the thing about this album is, and one of the reasons I'm so nuts to, as time goes on, review every single Iggy record, is to me, Iggy, and I kind of made reference to this in the one Avant-Garde New Wave video, is Iggy never hit it big like the Stones or Dylan or Neil Young. And even Lou Reed, even Lou Reed had a couple gold records in there. Iggy never got that far commercially. So until much, much, much later, I'm sure he must have gold or platinum or something by now. But for all those years, it just didn't exist. So, but the fact is that Iggy has somehow fucking managed, and is he the only one? Alice Cooper's. There have to be others, but there really aren't many people. But again, Alice had huge commercial success in the 70s and 80s, and I guess 90s as well. But Iggy has managed to make records from starting in the 60s all the way through. He has managed to navigate all the wild changes of music, fashion, culture, the corporate state, tech, you name it. He has managed to ride it all out and just keep existing and keep making records. And that is absolutely extraordinary. Without ever getting Bowie famous, or without just sort of staying in the underground and being an underground legend. So to me, he's kind of one of one. And I just, as a trip through the second half of the 20th century, now into the 21st century, I find that artistic voyage, but also survival voyage. And I don't mean even him personally, just him as an artist, him as a public persona, all of that. I find that absolutely fascinating. So that's one of the reasons I want to cover everything. And I think that if you look at the whole scope of Iggy's work, because after this, he's made 3 albums since this, and all 3 of those, to the best of my understanding, is musicians kind of bringing music to him. And then he writes some stuff. I don't think he wrote that much for free. But it's a very different thing than the kind of mad creative visionary that lasts up through the 90s. So this is, in a way, this is sort of the last album of where I think it was entirely self-generated. And I think that if Iggy has a late period masterwork, I sort of consider his late work to begin, I guess you would say, with either Brick by Brick or American Caesar. Probably American Caesar. I think this is his late period masterpiece. in, like I said, in the larger scope of his work. There haven't, in the 21st century, there haven't been a lot of those. I mean, in the 21st century, Lou Reed made 2 albums. The Raven, I don't know. And Lulu has Junior Dad and a few other moments that are deep and profound and beautiful. And then there's the rest of Lulu. The first half of Lulu, is very rough going. I know there are people who are now coming round and defending it vigorously, but I don't know. I don't get it. But, other than, to my mind, I love Neil Young, but Neil, somewhere after Chrome Dreams 2, just went off into fucking Bumblebee land. And, I know there are people who love Psychedelic Pill and a few of the other later records, Lanois. I like those. I don't love them. To me, Neil hasn't been like Neil in a long time. Bowie had The Next Day could have been a late period masterpiece. Black Star absolutely is. I mean, Black Star is truly a masterpiece. And then Dylan. I'm one of those. I may be one of one on this. I think The Tempest is post Love and Theft. I think is Dylan's definitive late period masterpiece. I will someday I'll review that one, and I will take it to the mountaintops if I have to. Rough and Rowdy Rays is close and very, very strong, but the Tempest is the one, I think. So this is in a very small category, and I looked back and it got better reviews than I remember it getting. But over time, I feel like this record has just kind of been dismissed along with the weirdness that these records are just kind of written off as a pair of misbegotten later efforts that perhaps shouldn't have been. But I disagree, and this intro is now ridiculously long, elephantine length. So let's talk about some fucking music, shall we? So the album begins with Burn, and one of the things about this record, so James Williamson produced it. How did this guy, and I'll get into this later more, but how did this guy not work on a record for 20 years, 23 years, or 22 years, I guess. He is so good in the studio. Like, my goodness, it's brilliant. Like, I love James Williamson's production on this record. I will give one knock against it, and that is, other than a couple songs, which I will mention, it does not necessarily paint a mental image. In a lot, like Exile on Main Street, let's say, perfect example, is like a mind movie the entire time. You are there. Or even like Satanic Majesties. I talked a lot about that, of how the indelible mental images that music creates, right? The one thing that's the one knock I will give James is the production maybe doesn't go to that level. It does here and there, but on the whole, that would be, like I said, that would be my one knock on it. But otherwise, James's production is incredible on this thing. So the first song is Burn, and it's amazing. I mean, it's like Iggy's State of the World address, singing it in a awesome, double-tracked. So that's the other thing. James knows what to do with Iggy's voice, and Iggy is fully committed. And Iggy, this is some of my favorite Iggy singing, basically. So it's a Oh, and that's the other thing. James's fucking guitar interjections. It's very Raw Power-esque guitar interjections. Buzz Osborne, is it Talk House or Chat House or something? There was a website not long after this record came out. Buzz Osborne did a review of this album and gave it a glowing review, and I would have to agree with him. He also interviewed James Williamson. So it's an interesting interview. There's a dude, like a needless third party on the interview, who keeps interjecting and, like, you know, making like dumb jokes, which takes away a little bit. But I'll find that. I'll have to find that as well, because that's a really cool interview, and Buzz and James seem to get on. But the guitar interjections are very Raw Power, though it is the mature distillation of the Raw Power. Like, it's not the freak out lunatic gonzo guitar, Edwin, God bless, lunacy of that. But this is the mature, refined version of that. But still fantastic. And Iggy's double track, it's like double track zombie shit. It's such a cool, compelling vocal sound. And the lyrics, I would have to imagine, are the tyranny of tech companies. And Iggy talks about that in the Oxford thing. It is, boy, he's not wrong. And good Lord, it only was going to get worse. So, 10 years removed from this record, it is a prescient, great piece of writing, and it's a fantastic, intense opener. Great riff. Scott sounds great. Mike Watt is like the weirdness a little undermixed in all of this, but still it's a great, dense rock and roll sound. And then we go into, so the album really opens with a really, really strong quartet of songs. So then the next song is Sex and Money. We got Steve McKay coming in with like some cool, kind of R&B sort of sax lines, or sax parts, I should say. So he's just like a one-man horn section. But it works. It does not sound grafted on. It feels like they figured out exactly what the hell to do with him. Whereas the weirdness, it feels like he was just kind of pushed to the mic occasionally. But this, like, they're parts, and he plays them wonderfully. Great sort of, like, dirty, gritty, I guess you could say grungy, not grunge, but, riff on Sex and Money. And Iggy all the way down in the lower register. I can't sleep at night anymore. It's, again, fantastic. And another kind of, if Burn is the state of the world, according to Iggy, Sex and Money is the state of him as an aging media figure. And it's absolutely fucking brutal and hard and gnarly, and that's how he sounds, and that's how the riff sounds, and that's how the band plays it. And there is a interesting moment when Iggy sings, and sometimes, again, people sometimes don't like this aspect of Iggy's late period lyrics. I tend to like it. The line, "Nipples come and nipples go," and that, granted, I was going through a divorce anyway, but that line just fucking hit me, because when I was a younger man, that was, there were, every now and again, if I was with somebody, especially if I was with somebody that I felt was sort of out of my league, I would like go out of my way to try to memorize like what she looked like down to like every possible detail. And it was this weird sort of thing that would kick in my brain. And especially because also, and I've referenced this before, I always thought that I was going to be dead soon. So, like, that was another thing. I always thought, like, well, this could be the last time I'm with a woman. So I would, like, and then she would go away. And there was part of me, and I think this might be pretty common, where you're like, oh, I'm not going to get to see that again or get to experience that again. And so but then as you age, you sort of find the intensity of that sort of laughable and like ridiculous. And Iggy just writing it as nipples come and nipples go is sort of, by that point, that was one of the only ways I could wrap my head around how totally fucked up and like destroyed my life was a sort of c'est la vie, what the hell, I don't know what the fuck to do, sort of nipples come and nipples go, you know? So the other thing is, by that point, mid-song, he goes up an octave, and the music doesn't go up an octave, he goes up an octave, and he just sounds fucking fantastic. He sounds like the iguana. I mean, it's just... it's so dirty and so real and also so right. God damn it, he sounds fucking good. It's the opposite of the weirdness vocal sound and how he's mixed and where he's placed. Like, it's just one of my favorite vocals that he ever did, and it is so fucking real, and there's a certain amount of self-recrimination, or not even self-recrimination, self-acknowledgement. Self-acknowledgement of, yes, you've had these shit circumstances and you've had to plow through, but you've also created some of your own wreckage or created some of your own chaos, and acknowledging that and being realistic about that. It's an outstanding fucking song. I love it. And then the next song is Job. And Job is another one of my favorites. I think that this is maybe a little bit more of a character study, because I think it might be like a first-person character study, specifically because of the line about being in lockdown. And, I just... Again, Iggy has this tendency in his later lyrics, starting in the 90s, to sort of put himself in the headspace of like people who are either on the lam or facing prison sentences or in prison or just got out of prison. There's a lot of lurking around and a lot of sneaking and a lot of making sure he's not seen. There's a lot of that. And a lot of I don't fit in this world, and I don't fit with these people, and it's a pronounced outsider stance that is not just like, oh, I'm somebody famous or whatever. Like it feels like larger moments of a character study. So and I'm perfectly willing to accept that is what Iggy's consciously doing. He may very well not be, but I'm reading into that. So Job is because and for me the tip off is I'm just a guy with a rock star attitude, and I don't think Iggy has a rock star attitude. Iggy is a fucking rock star. For some of us, he might be the single rock star. He might be the best fucking at it that ever lived. So a rock star just simply exists and is. They don't necessarily need to have or cultivate a rock star attitude because their attitude is the rock star attitude. I don't know. But that's my thought on it. So I think it's a character study of somebody really down and out or potentially facing being down and out. It's a very paranoid song. And again, the vocal sound, it's, I guess it's achieved via a duet, so he's singing up, but then he's really growly and low, and it is gritty and dirty, and it just sounds fucking great. Like doing this stuff with his voice, and and it's not like they're putting like a lot of effects. I think there is kind of like a slight distortion effect on his voice, but basically this is just him, and that's part of what I love about it. And when he runs down the arty crowd and the fashion crowd, that's as good of an assessment as I think anyone can give. That's as good of a sociological breakdown as you're going to get in this day and age. So and that's the other thing. There are two people credited with percussion on this record. One is Toby Dammit, who wound up being the kind of temporary replacement drummer for Scott. But the other is Jason Butler. I don't know who Jason Butler is. But there are clavs on the I Got a Job. Like, there are little touches on this record that enhance everything and bring it forward, because it sounds like it was cared for. It doesn't sound like the last album of in different studio settings. They did like a check for levels, and then we're like, yeah, that's fuck it, good, leave it. It actually sounds like somebody gave a fuck about what they were doing. So I love the little touches on the not just the more obvious things like treating Iggy's vocals, but the clavinets echoing Iggy on the chorus, beautiful, love it. And it's a great song. It's just a great, again, these are just great rock and roll songs. I don't know how you couldn't like these, and then we get to Gun, and echoes of Your Pretty Face Is Going to Hell, more guitar interjection-y kind of stuff, though James does play a great fucking solo on this one. And this is kind of the next idea past my idea of fun, I suppose. And it is, again, this is just, it is a brutal song. Not just because Iggy envisions himself as a potential mass shooter, but just the intensity of the observations. Where is it? Here it is. There are two in particular. Everyone's like the police, ain't no way to get some peace. And again, I think, like Byrne, that is some prescient thinking, because starting around 10 years ago, I remember, maybe 8 years ago, I remember thinking, there's watching how people act on the internet, and watching how people act on Twitter, and watching how people acted on on Tumblr. Really, it started with Tumblr to me, and then seeing it on Twitter. I remember thinking then, and this would have been after hearing this song too, but there's not going to be a need for a PMRC or a Mary Whitehouse type figure when everyone is the cop in their own brain. Yeah, so you could say that Frank Zappa called it in 1966 when he asked, "Who are the brain police?" This is the next, this song is like the next development of that, and I want to get the other yes. And boy, this when, especially because by this point I was 30. I turned 35 that year, and when as you get into your 30s and beyond, the decisions you make have more gravity to them. You can't just sort of brush things off the way that you did when you were younger, because you've got all sorts of time, and most of the people around you are brushing things off as well. Stuff starts to matter in ways that you couldn't have imagined, and you lose some of the flexibility of your own flippancy. And so the line, money is a waste of time, because, I mean, that's the Iggy that of his youth. That's a line of youth. Money is a waste of time. And on some level, I still believe that. I think that's a reasonable thing to think. But it's Iggy now, and it's the Iggy who's done commercials, and Iggy who's had to do all sorts of shit. Of course, I made sure I got mine. And that's fucking real. That's fucking real. And I think the people who don't like these reunion records, or don't like this record, and unfairly lump it in with the weirdness, I think there's a certain amount of ageism, and there's a certain amount, I sometimes have aspects of this myself. Like, I'll be honest, I sometimes won't check out a band's later records until I'm way, way deep in the fandom, because I'm more purely interested in what they had to say in 1980 as opposed to what they're saying now. And, fuck that. This, and that's one of the reasons, again, I want to review all of these records and take them all seriously and treat them all with the same amount of consideration. Because, records are not fucking dildos for you to fuck yourself off with while you're pretending that you're still 22, And I have now spent more time away from being 22 than I did approaching it. So, and 22, yeah, there were some good times, but there was a lot of garbage and a lot of stupidity, and you were put in a lot of shit positions that were, humiliating, So there's a lot of things I just, as a 45-year-old, I just don't have to deal with that I did at 22, and certainly younger than that. So, like, sure, this stuff can be escapism and all that, but art, music, whatever, rock and roll at its best is dealing with emotional honesty and intensity and reality, and money is a waste of time. Of course, I made sure I got mine is fucking real, and I don't know. When you see people dying off and you see the conditions that they die off in, you make sure that you make sure that you get yours, because otherwise, we've all seen some dire endings for people. So, and a lot who do not deserve that. So, it's a great fucking song. I absolutely love it. So we've had four beautiful, fucking awesome driving rock and roll songs. I haven't really talked much about Mike Watt in this. Watt is again a little undermixed. He's more audible than he is on the weirdness, certainly. But Scott is. I haven't really talked about Scott. Scott is Scott. He's just awesome, and he's supporting the songs in a way. I don't think he's driving the band as much as he was on the weirdness, partially because these songs are a little bit more songwriterly and have more delineated verses and choruses and bridges and stuff. So I think Scott is playing in a more Ringo manner than Charlie Watts manner, but so he's not calling attention to himself. But Scott has, Scott, dumb thing to say, Scott sounds like Scott. He sounds great, and the Scott groove Scott's way of playing a groove or playing parts. I don't know. To me, he has such a powerful sonic identity that to me, Scott is Scott. Like, I just feel like, there's certain people like that, right? So Ringo, Charlie Watts, Phil Rudd, there are certain people like that is just how they play, and they hit what they hit, and it, nobody can replicate that really. We've had that. So then we go into a ballad. Now there is a pedal steel player credited. What's the cat's name? Don Rook. I don't know shit about Don Rook, but he and I don't know what he's playing versus what James is doing, but Don Rook is fantastic on this, and that is the last song on what we're gonna pretend is side one. I saw one vinyl copy of this record one time, and it was up behind the cash register. It would have been within a few months of this thing coming out, and it was like $1 bajillion. And I thought, oh, I'll get to it eventually. I just never did. I love this. I play this. Fucking hell. So, Unfriendly World. Beautiful, sparse, austere, imagistic lyrics from Iggy. This has an atmosphere. This feels like some sort of like Southern Gothic, maybe early morning. It's about to get really hot. This has that sense of time and space, and Iggy sings all the way down. And again, because this is not the indifferent production of the weirdness, Iggy's low voice is fully present and with full gravity. He sounds amazing, and it's if Gun and Burn and Sex and Money are brutal reflections on aging, this is a sad, elegiac reflection on aging, brutally honest. There's no self-pity in it. It's just observations as one ages. During the bridge, goes into a bit of state of the world commentary, which I completely agree with, and is 100 times better than the social commentary on greedy, awful people, for instance. It's real stuff. Businessmen with nasty tricks, followers of 666. I mean, that sums it up. But that is passing, because really, again, the images that he presents of like old decorations and stuff, beautiful. It's a beautiful choice. It's a beautiful sort of metaphor for the passage of time and dealing with the passage of time and what happens to you as you grow older. What is cool is just before he repeats the first verse at the end, it hints towards towards love. It hints towards romance. It hints towards the healing power of love. It's just a moment of it. It's just a little like sprinkle, and it's a beautiful touch. But otherwise, it's a lot of hard-won wisdom. It's very real. Iggy sounds absolutely amazing, singing in the deep sort of basso profundo voice, and it's a absolutely gorgeous way, and beautiful intertwining acoustic guitars with, I guess, the lap steels on here. It could be just a slide. I can't really tell exactly, but either way, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So. It's a really cool, interesting way to end the first half of this record, and unexpected, because you don't expect that on a Stooges record, and from the men who brought you raw power. It's disarmingly naked in the moment. So a really, really cool way for the first half of this, what I think is an exceptional album. So we will flip the record over. So, side two. or side two, who really knows? I'm just demarcating it as that. Is the title track, and boy, you can tell why it is the title track. It is just an exceptional, beautiful piece of work. Some of the kind of, again, like I don't want I. It's unfortunate that it's the name of a genre, because it really is a grungy. So I used Edwin's word gonzo already before. I will use another Edwin term, down and dirty, truly down and dirty, gritty riff. And again, the thing that James Williamson does so well are those amazing, like, guitar interjections from riff to sort of lead liner. I don't even know what you would call them, but they're just it's also interesting to hear him play in that style, because he doesn't really do that on Kill City. It's interesting to hear him do it without, like, the raw power, the sonics, the weird warped phantasmagoria freak out sonics of Raw Power. So it's just cool to hear him in a more, I guess, naturalized state. Again, the older, mature, refined version of that. And Iggy, I think that there are meditations on aging, sort of statements to the world, what in one's mind could be seen as, like, final statements to the world. It's a heavy song. It's a very serious song to say that you're ready to die. I said before that there is not necessarily an atmosphere that is evoked through the production or the overall sound of the record. The unfriendly world there definitely is here. This is storm clouds on the horizon. Like if you're driving, like, through the Midwest, like a rural area, and you see the lines of ominous ever darkening gray off in the distance. That is, like, it's absolutely phenomenal. And especially, and the other thing is the fucking drum sound, and the way Scott just plays those breaks. It's so minimal, but so perfect. He is, like, again, I mean, there's a reason I love that guy's playing so much. There's a reason I revere Scott so much. And, it's a heavy thing to, it's one thing, the last song on Raw Power, Death Trip, and, like, it's like, it's one thing when you're young and, we're going to go on a death trip. It's a completely different thing at the point that they were at in their lives. Iggy was 60 something at this point. And, Ron was already gone. And it means something completely different when you're that age to say that you're ready to die. And Iggy sings it with total conviction and total believability. These are not idle ravings. And there's a seriousness to it. There's a seriousness of purpose to Scott's playing. But as great as Iggy is, this is where James comes to the fore. Holy shit, James unleashes a fucking corker of a solo. The whole thing is tension. He is, even before he gets to the solo, the guitar interjection stuff at the beginning is like, it's like fucking strangulation of the neck. And, towards the end, when Iggy is repeating the chorus, so basically, like, the guitar solo is just, again, it's a study, it's a masterpiece of tension and strangulation and I guess anxiety. And then Iggy comes back in singing the chorus, but the solo never really ends because James does this ridiculously fucking awesome thing. It's truly like one of the finest moments of music making, like in the whole Stooges body of work. The solo just keeps going, but it becomes this like long extended single note crescendo, even though it's under Iggy's voice, and just like really fast single note picking that just becomes like all the more tense and all the more foreboding, and is just huge and oceanic, and then the whole thing comes to a dead stop. It is really dramatic and extremely powerful, and it is a bracing moment on this album, and kind of throws the songs that had been leading up to this. It makes them all the more serious and imposing. So the placement of this song on the album is perfect, because I think earlier on in the sequence it would have cast too much of a shadow. So after all that darkness and storm and Sturm und Drang, you need some light relief, and god damn it, do we get the greatest of relief. There's been tension, and now there shall be release. So the next song is, in some circles, very notorious. It is very disliked. The song is Double D's, and many people do not like this song, and use it as an example of like, oh my god, what the fuck. All right, so here we go. Here we motherfucking go. This will be right up there with Family Man and Revelation, and I'm taking shots at Steve, among other things. With my videos, if nothing else, you at least know that my thinking is my own. So here we go. Double D's is so. First of all, it starts off with what? It starts off with a fucking Mike Watt bass line. What are the odds? Mike Watt is leading off the show. Mike Watt gets his own moment to himself, right? And it's an awesome sort of like faux or cod Motown sort of bass line. And then Scott comes in. This, to me, is Scott's best work on the whole album. It's my favorite thing. Scott beats the shit out of a 4/4 like no man on the planet. It's so funny because it's one of those things like, it doesn't on the surface, it doesn't seem, god damn it, I'm gonna make a sports analogy to another no nonsense working class tough as nails motherfucker who I'm going to make another sports analogy. Marvin Hagler. He is the marvelous Marvin Hagler of drums, where you watch the Hagler fight, and at first it doesn't necessarily appear that he's doing anything exceptional, and yet by the 5th, 6th round, the guy's covered in blood, he's staggering, like, and Marvin is like unflappable and just doing the thing, and he did it again and again and again and again and again and again and again for years, right? And that is fucking Scott. Like Scott, like on one hand you can't figure out how is it this awesome what he's doing, because it's just right? Like theoretically anyone can do it, but like almost nobody can, and nobody sounds that good doing it. Again, sonic identity. The sound of the man hitting a snare drum is one of like the best gifts you're fucking given in life. I don't know how else to put it. I can listen to the man play drums all day. Truly, if there were drum only mixes of Stooges records, I could listen to those. Kind of like I said about in the Stones video about Charlie. I could listen to just drum mixes of Charlie. Like Scott is just, oh my god, is my fucking man. So and then you've got Steve. Steve, are there other horns on here? I feel like there might be. Let me check really quick, because I don't remember now. Come on. Are there other drums? I didn't think there were. Okay, there aren't. Okay, just in case. So yeah, so what are they doing with Steve McKay? They're multi-tracking him. Steve McKay is the one-man horn section. Fucking awesome. Does he pull it off? Fuck yeah. Does it sound great? Does it sound completely organic and interwoven into the band and what the band is and how the band should sound? Yes, absolutely. Is it some weird grafted on thing? Like, oh, we need horns? No, absolutely not. It is a central and essential part of what you are hearing. The sound is so, and the guitars are, it's a clean but yet dark sound, and almost vaguely Doors-ish, almost, I guess, if I had to compare it to something. But it is played with such buoyancy and life and verve and feeling and joie de vivre and carpe diem and other things in languages other than English. It is just, I have listened to this fucking song. I have never listened to this song in my entire life. I have never listened to this song once. I have only ever listened to it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever fucking times. And it only gets fucking louder the more I play it, okay? And I only get more and more nuts the more I play it, because it's that fucking good. Like, I fucking love, I'm gonna say, I love this song more than any other song I've heard in the last 10 years. I don't keep up with a lot of modern music. I don't pay attention to a lot. This song, this is my fucking anthem. This is my fucking anthem as a 45-year-old, okay? So, I started off with women or with girls when I was very young. It starts with me way early, and and I was like driven towards girls when I was 4 or 5 years old. I was driven at a very early age. Okay, so by the time this song came out, I was off the hook. I was non-existent in that realm. Okay, and I would be for a while, and I had sort of obliterated myself so thoroughly that that the idea, like I had somehow lost. I had thought that I had become somehow like asexual. It was like a glimmer in the distance of, oh yeah, I used to like that. I used to be like that. And this song, when I fucking really got into this album, this song was the lighthouse. It was the beacon in the night, off in the distance. That this is what you need. This is what you should be aiming the boat at. This is how good it could be. This is what it used to be like, right? And as I healed and dealt with things and pulled an identity back together and pulled my life back together and sorted through the fucking wreckage, and because I mean, I was fucking out. Like, when I started seeing a therapist, I wasn't like, my fucking fingernails were out to here. It was all like a total like Howard Hughes shit. Like the fingernails were out here. It would take me on the weekends. It would take me an hour of like talking myself into like brushing my teeth. I mean, it was I was basically a non-functioning adult. I could get up and go to work, but even then I had like, I had like my Monday through Wednesday clothes and then the Thursday and Friday clothes. And I would just keep them on a pile in my bedroom and just like, here's the Monday shirt, here's the Monday socks, and then I would run out of laundry and I couldn't be bothered to do laundry. So socks would get turned inside out, et cetera, et cetera. Like I was a non-functioning adult, and, I had to pull everything back together. I had to reorient like fucking everything, and And this song was the promise. This song was promise of life beyond fucking misery. Because I was down so fucking hard that I had to get to feeling miserable. I wasn't even miserable. I was calcified, okay? So this song is one of the things that brought me fucking back to life. And once I got back to life, I stayed back to life because the song is so fucking awesome and so fucking right. And here's the thing. There are a lot of, especially now, especially in the last 20-some years, right? There's a lot of fucking ass songs. There's a lot of endless ass-shaking songs and ass celebrations and on and on and on and on and on, okay? There are, and Danny McBride delineated this point very, very, very well in one of the episodes of Eastbound and Down about there are tit men and there are ass men. And ultimately, really never the twain shall meet, really. And you know what? Here's the thing. I know what I am. And I know what I've always been. And I know I was that when I was fucking 5 and 6, okay? Like, that's always been the case. Before I even knew what it was, I knew that that's what it was. Period, right? So this song, is it the only song ever that's a celebration of this, especially in an oily ocean of ass songs? You have one fucking song about, like, 2 of the greatest gifts that a man can receive in life, right? So, God fucking damn it. And who was gonna write it? My fucking man, fucking Iggy. God damn it, man. James Osterberg was the fucking man to write the song. And here's the thing. Sure, it's a dumb song about... No, it isn't dumb. No, it isn't dumb. No, first of all, because Iggy cuts to the core of the issue brilliantly and perfectly, by saying, and I have quoted this endlessly, and if you've been around me, you've heard me quote this. It's symbolic of a good atmosphere. You can't argue with that. Complications seem to just disappear. William Shakespeare couldn't have fucking said it better. Aristotle, I think he would have missed. Fucking, because, and then he also addresses the sheer absurdity of writing a song about tits by even better. He addresses his own critics, because he knows, because Iggy's a fucking genius. There's no need to be pedantic, because this is basic, not romantic. Fuck, check and mate. You know? Case closed, appeal denied. Fucking awesome. It's... And I will also just throw in, James throws in a beautiful little understated solo, but really this is Iggy's show, and Iggy just flying over the top of the fucking awesomeness of Mike Watt as one with Scott, who playing the single greatest 4/4 of the 21st century, and then my man Steve McKay, who gets to fucking show up and run the party for a while too. An absolutely magnificent song. A song that went from a point of destination to now destination. And that's where I fucking live. And I'm not moving. You know, I'm not moving away. I arrived. It was as awesome as Iggy promised it would be. And that's where I stay now. That's where I live. Iggy wrote the fucking anthem. Iggy wrote the anthem of my middle age. He wrote the existence of my middle age. Right? I'm not searching and destroying. I'm not on a death trip. I don't want to be anybody's dog. Well, I mean, you know, if the situation's right. But like, double D's, fuck yeah, right on. Thank you, Iggy. Seriously, in all seriousness, seriously, if you ever happen to see this, Iggy, thank you. Seriously, this fucking song and another song, which we're going to get to, and Soldier, I survived because of that. So thank you, Iggy. God bless you. So, there are those of us who fucking live on this stuff, man. You know? What's the Rene Ricard line from the Basquiat movie? except that's about painting. But like, be careful because you might be looking at Van Gogh's ear. You know, the shit when it really is life and death. That's and again, the gravity of Ready to Die. That's the gravity of Ready to Die, and that's the joy, the fucking joy and beauty and release of Double D's. Okay, so. And if you don't like that song, you may not have a soul. I don't know. I don't know. Do you have a reflection when you walk past mirrors? I don't know. You might not. You know, if you prick your finger, is there like a puff of air that comes out? I don't know. Should think about that. So we go right from that into Dirty Deal. And so Dirty Deal is maybe, if I have to have a least favorite song on this album, it might be Dirty Deal, but I get why it's here, and it has to be here, because on the final Stooges album, I think Iggy needs to lay bare how fucked he was and how fucked they all got. Steve McKay playing beautiful, droning fucking notes. Beautiful, beautiful. Again, another grungy, down and dirty, great riff from James. And a kind of, I guess maybe the most obviously bluesy or blues-based writing. And Iggy, you know, just laying out what happened to all of them as young men. You know, they signed a dirty deal. And Iggy uses the word innocent, which is interesting because I wonder if he picked that up from Paul Trinka, who uses the word to describe the Ashetons. And it would be interesting if Iggy had keyed in on that. Because I personally keyed in on that, and I wonder if Iggy did, because it's an interesting use of the word. And Trinka, that was like one of his sort of recurring themes that he would come back to in that book. So interesting. And Scott is great on it. And you know, the way the band plays behind Iggy and the way that they are melded to him, the way that they looked when they were standing behind him at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, you know, they've talked about that before, of Iggy kind of being the spokesman, that they make the sound, but Iggy says the thing, you know? And I really get the sense, I feel like Dirty Deal is very necessary, because if you saw the Raw Power documentary and you look, the look in Scott's eyes, like Scott in his later years in this era was pretty much always wearing shades. Scott has like the most soulful eyes in rock and roll, basically. Like that is a real person in there, you know. And I think did I talk about this in the last video? I feel like I might have, but like it all comes out in the playing, and there's this sense of and you get this with certain musicians, especially who don't say all that much. There is this sense of, this is who I am, and then that energy is then being channeled to and through and back from Iggy, right? So, you know, when Scott looks towards the camera, not directly into the camera, but like looks up after the commercial failure of Raw Power, and he's talking about that and the bullshit that they had to deal with, and rejection and the condescending horseshit that they had to deal with, and he says, like, I guess art lost. That is a devastating moment, you know? Again, that's heavy. It's heavy. And, you know, so I think you know, I feel like this song is as much for the Ashetons and James as much as it is for Iggy. And it's not just his frustrations with being on the road for, you know, 40 years. But so it's a great song. It's just probably my least favorite. And it also happens to fall between two songs of great significance in my life. So the next song is Beat That Guy. Holy shit. Okay. So I had the unfortunate circumstances, I think we all have, of working for a truly incompetent piece of shit for a few years there. And he was two things. He was very stupid, and he was really arrogant. So arrogance and stupidity is a hell of a combination. And I always said if he was born in any other country, he would have been dead before he was like 23. You know, because he just only here could this fucking doofus survive. You know, and you know, he eventually got demoted and moved away. But just a complete fucking asshole. And at a time in my life where I already had a lot going on and I was already like kind of barely keeping things together, I had to go and deal with this stupid fuck. And I mean, he would fucking quote, like, he would, you know, would have meetings with us where he would quote Robert Schuller. Do you know Robert Schuller with the glass temple? You know, like, he would fucking quote Robert Schuller. My dad, for some reason, liked Robert Schuller, and I used to have to watch Robert Schuller's sermons sometimes when I was a kid, you know? And, like, fuck Robert Schuller, fuck that ugly glass fucking building, and fuck that motherfucker that I used to have to work with. So, just such a, oh my god. Like, literally, like, there were so many things, like, that he did and said. But I'll throw one out. When a newer, bigger boss was hired, and we all had to go and justify our jobs, he asked for lists of everybody's job functions and tasks, and he read mine, except under the notion that it was him doing all that. Like that, and this was the introduction. Like the bigger boss had never met any of us before, and this motherfucker, because he was our boss, got to go first. So I mean, there were so many things like that. This absolute fucking asshole, and he had there was also the matter of his appearance. Not to be not to be petty, but you know the Dave Chappelle sketch with like the Sesame Street except for adults. And you remember was it the gonorrhea puppet with like the googly eyes, like the weird shade of pink and then googly eyes? That's what this fucking dude looked like. He had fucking huge googly eyes and like, ooh, and he wouldn't close his mouth, like, ooh. So anyway, when I knew that I had meetings coming up with this motherfucker, or he had some freak out at the end of the day, because for some reason he would, his day would start quiet and then he would get louder as the day went on. I used to call it operatic. And so anyway, when the last day had ended poorly, and he'd had some, baby needs his bottle fucking lunacy, and I was coming in the next day knowing it was going to be like, this motherfucker's going to have booked 5 meetings with me. I used to listen to Beat That Guy. Beat That Guy was, again, a beacon of, this is temporary and you will survive this and you will beat that guy. There will come a point where you barely remember the specifics. You'll just remember that he was an asshole, and that's it, right? So the song begins with a beautiful, stately acoustic guitar introduction, and like, we're off and running. Like, Iggy's lyrics are absolutely fucking perfect, and the way he sings it, emotional reality, and there's no airs, there's no artifice, there's no pretension, and I feel I gotta bite if I'm gonna bark, can't think about slinking off in the dark. That's it. That was my fucking life. It was kind of my life in all aspects at that point. Like, I'm gonna have to bite if I'm gonna bark. I can't think about slinking off in the dark. That was my fucking life. Because I mean, I was in the dark, you know, and I couldn't slink any further into the dark. Brilliant, brilliant. And then it goes into this beautiful, I guess, middle eight, where Petra Haden is providing these gorgeous, soaring, soothing, I dare say, heavenly, perhaps, vocal parts. And it's as beautiful as is it the Celeste or Celeste on Penetration? It's as unexpected and as glorious as that. There's more percussion on this. It just sort of, it's almost symphonic. Scott Thurston, who last would have been seen on New Values, but was having a late career, has never been bigger because he was the touring keyboard player for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, but originally a Stooge. Scott Thurston appears briefly. It's this glorious sort of uprush of sound, you know, and then we go into the final verse, and then we go into if it hadn't just happened 2 songs ago, the other greatest moment of James Williamson. James Williamson shows up and plays the most soulful, fucking beautiful guitar solo, soaring, like, just a true, like, I'm still standing, you never got me down, Ray, fucking guitar solo. You never got me down. You know? That's what the guitar solo is. You know, there's been some, the record shows I took the blows and I did it my way. You know, you never got me down, Ray. That's what that fucking guitar solo is. It's beautiful. It is a magnificent piece of music making. Like, James just plays us out. He plays us out. And it kind of goes into this almost unexpected, like, I don't know, like McCartney-esque or something, like sort of like very classically beautiful, I dare say sweet, quiet ending that is almost, given that it's the context of a Stooges album, it's almost like you laugh a little because it's so sort of conventionally beautiful. But then, but at this point, if you've lived long enough and you understand that people grow and change, you're like, no, fuck yeah, it should go to that. It shouldn't go off in a blaze of chaos. Like, that's right. And I will take a classically beautiful ending, full ending to a song. Like, fucking right on, especially after that guitar solo, especially after that song. So, and Petra Haden's vocals, beautiful, beautiful. So then the album ends with The Departed, the only song not co-written by James. This is a co-write between Scott and Iggy. Is that the only time that ever happened? It might be. So this is the last song on the last Stooges record. And there's I kind of like Unfriendly World. I don't know. There's Pedal Steel, I guess, but I don't know sort of if it's the Rook guy. Is that his name? I don't even remember. Apologies. What's his cat's name? Yeah, Rook. Sorry, Mr. Rook, I don't know. But I don't know which is James and which is him. I don't know. It is circular. It begins and ends with a quote of "I want to be your dog," which I think is appropriate. My understanding is that this was an idea, maybe the beginning of a musical idea that Ron and Scott had for potentially a follow-up to The Weirdness. If I'm remembering correctly, there had been a little concert / private sort of, I don't even know, event for Ron that the Stooges played at. And Iggy, my understanding was that Iggy sort of premiered a little bit of the music from this song on that night. You have to forgive me. I'm remembering this from, like, that would have been 2009. So if I'm getting the details wrong from that, please forgive me. But but it's, it's a very haunting, atmospheric piece. I'm assuming it has to be James just on slide. I would have to assume. It's a beautiful little song. I will tiny quibble. Iggy goes for a couple kind of indifferent lyrics, and then he also throws in, he name checks Death Trip, but also name checks what's Dirty Deal, and that I'll be honest, that has always taken me out of the song a little bit, but otherwise it's very, very haunting. It reminds me in some ways of, not that it sounds like this, but just in terms of spirit and tone, it reminds me of the Dime Store Mystery, the Lou Reed elegy for Andy Warhol. And it's just, it is a beautiful song. It's a beautiful way to pay tribute to Ron, and to just look at the band, look at this group of men as they have aged. And, also, is that the song that Scott doesn't play on? That's also odd. So I think Iggy's touring drummer plays on that. So that leads into, I saw the Stooges, it would have been 2011. They were doing Raw Power plus a couple songs from Kill City, and like I Gotta Write and stuff. And even that was interesting because I remember there being rumors then that Scott had been sick, but Mike Watt was like, had crutches, like old school, like World War II crutches, like with the brace where you hold on to the thing, so like Mike Watt hobbled out on stage. He played amazingly. He was awesome. And but Iggy, I feel like that was the beginnings of Iggy really limping, and like the back damage and the leg damage, like really kind of being apparent, but he still jumped into the crowd. He wasn't jumping up on top of marshals and shit like that, but he did leap into the crowd a few times. That was an incredible show. And, in a long tradition of going back to my youth, there was a girl there who was ridiculously fucking gorgeous, and I remember thinking, wow, at another time in my life I would have talked to this girl. And I remember when the band, we were waiting for the encore, she pulled out like an old school train schedule, and I recognized the route because it was my route that I used to take when I was in college, and I was like, oh my god, like totally, like, oh my god, if I wasn't here with all these people, I might have I might have said something, but I mean, not. I was married at the time to my first wife, so I don't mean it like I wouldn't have said something if you get what I'm saying. If I was unmarried, I would have said something, and much younger, because at that point I didn't, my confidence in myself was starting to go down. So, but I always remember that girl and just kind of being like, wow, that is Jesus. Like, that's about as good looking as a woman gets. That is that, but it was an amazing show. It was, it was the third time I saw Iggy, second time I saw the Stooges, and absolutely phenomenal. I don't know that it was quite up to the heights of when I saw them with Ron, but this was still pretty amazing. But you could, like I said, you could really see like the wear and tear on them. And then, within just about a year of this album coming out, and about 5 years or so after Ron, Scott passed away. My understanding is that Toby Dammit sort of filled in on drums for a while, but then there was the documentary that they made about the post-pop depression record, and Iggy talked about sort of the end of the Stooges, and it is really weird how history repeated itself, that Iggy, again, Iggy's big complaint, and I think he talked about this in Please Kill Me, was that James had more or less just sort of taken control of the band. And and he was like, the keyboard player was his guy, the roadies were his guys, like, and I think that the longer Ron, in the original run of the Stooges, the longer Ron was just the bass player, the more, I think, checked out he got in terms of the politics of the band. He gave everything he had if they were recording or playing, but I think beyond that, I think he just was like, I don't think he was vying for control or anything like that. And it's funny because, and that was a big part of Iggy's resentment. And, again, flash forward all these decades, and Iggy again finds himself without any Ashetons, with a band that James is kind of running again. And, Iggy talks about this a little bit in the post-pop depression documentary, that I guess James was sort of, I don't know, trying to rally the whoever was left sort of against Iggy, and being very critical of Iggy. I don't really get what all of that was or what all the politics of that were, but especially without any Ashetons, I'm glad the Stooges ended. But I think it would have ended, I think it was going to end because, for whatever reason, Iggy and James just don't mix. And Iggy has talked about, that's the other thing. Even though Iggy had a really disconcertingly weird habit of insisting on referring to Scott as the drummer, and not like the drummer, like he's the drum. It was always like, oh, the drummer said. And when he would imitate the Ashetons, it was always like kind of like talking like, like this, like a character on Beavis and Butthead. And I always thought that was a little strange. But he always also talked about the Ashetons when it wasn't that, he would talk about the Ashetons kind of like reverently and with sort of a certain amount of awe, And I think that he always really respected and admired their talent. He didn't really ever talk about James quite that way. And, he said that he had to get himself, I remember him saying that he could make music naturally with the Ashetons, whereas he had to get in a state where he was deranged in order to make music with James. And for whatever reason, they just don't get on. But they made two incredible albums together where they're direct collaborators. I know, obviously, James produced Soldier up to a point and New Values. But these two albums, and then there's Kill City. So from Kill City to this point is, what is that? 85, 95, 05. So nearly 40 years. But they did it again. There was some sort of weird, crazy chemistry that these guys had. And they were able to channel it for one more time. And that is remarkable. And create a remarkable set of songs, a remarkable album of songs. There is one bonus track, which I actually don't have. It's a song called Dying Breed. It is up on YouTube. It's okay. It's kind of stonesy. It almost sounds in a weird way like a Weirdness outtake. But it clearly isn't. That's clearly James that's clearly his style. But it almost has a Weirdness vibe. And I don't know, I almost got the feeling like he didn't really like the song very much or something. But yeah, so that is that, and that is this album. It's kind of a masterpiece, or maybe it's a near masterpiece, or I don't know. It's only not a masterpiece by their own standards, but I think it is. I think this is the best album. Is it? I'm thinking, yeah, this is the best album Iggy made in the 21st century. The three he made after this, Post-Pop Depression was a critical favorite, Free, interesting, and I'm not comfortable commenting yet on the latest Every Loser. I just haven't lived with it enough. It's interesting that one of the things I've seen on some of the Facebook groups are people are really warming to it, sort of the longer that it's out. My initial impression of it, I thought it was just okay. I also am warming to it, so I don't want to commit to any opinions yet, just quite yet. But this is, and who knows, I might really come to love it. I mean, I didn't like Soldier the first time I heard it. So yeah, this is a wonderful album, and if you haven't listened to it, or if you heard the weirdness and thought, no way, give it a shot. Give it a shot, because it's there's some exceptional music on there, and I love the fucking thing, and it has funnily enough served an important role in my life. So so I think that is pretty good for now. Thank you for watching. You know, it's very much appreciated, and you know, if you do like this album, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on it. You know, because again, I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm sort of putting this out there, is because, like, I am curious if there's anybody else who likes this record as much as I do, and because I just don't see, you know, people generally don't like the weirdness, but I feel like people just don't talk about this one at all. So so yeah, so hopefully, you know, it'd be kind of cool if this video finds some people who really enjoy this album. But yeah, I think that's pretty good. Lots of ideas for what the next video could be. I'm right now, I'll be honest, I'm leaning towards the Germs, because I'm going to do them anyway at some point. I was thinking about the Weirdos, but the Weirdos have a complicated release history, and there's not a lot, but it's a little all over the place, and some of it I actually don't have. So I'm sort of trying to figure out how deep I want to go into that. It very, I don't know, it could be the Germs, who knows, I might totally change my mind, you never know. So at any rate, thank you for watching, hope you've enjoyed this. You know, all the YouTube things, like and comment and subscribe, and I will see you again in the next video. Alright, bye.